Maribel didn't notice the man beside her until the last coin rolled off the tray table and landed in his lap. It was the kind of sound that cut through the hush of a midnight flight, a faint metallic clink, sharp and final. She froze, mortified, staring at the single quarter resting against the stranger's tailored jeans. He looked down, then up at her, one eyebrow raised, not in annoyance but curiosity. She started, but her voice cracked. Her hand trembled as she reached for the coin. I didn't mean to. Keep it, he said, his tone quiet, steady. Looks like it's all you've got left. Her chest tightened. He wasn't wrong. The coins in her palm, 1172 to be exact, were everything she owned. Her last money after selling her wedding ring, after pawning her suitcase for enough to buy this ticket. It was supposed to take her somewhere safe, somewhere she could start again. But sitting there in seat 14B, with her baby feverish and asleep against her chest, she suddenly wasn't sure if somewhere safe existed anymore. The man, dark suit, silver cufflinks, watch that probably cost more than her old apartment, didn't look like someone who noticed women like her. Yet he was watching her now, not with pity but something quieter. Awareness. Rough night? He asked. She forced a thin smile. You could say that. Baby sick? She nodded, brushing a curl from Camilla's damp forehead. Just a fever. She's been like this since yesterday. He didn't press, didn't offer the usual platitudes strangers did. He simply leaned back in his seat, folded his hands and stared out the small oval window into the black expanse of sky. When the flight attendant passed by offering drinks, Maribel hesitated, glancing at the menu. A small bottle of water, $4. She had exactly enough, but spending it would mean no bus fare when they landed. Her throat was already dry, but she shook her head. No, thank you. The man ordered coffee. When the attendant returned, he added softly, and one more water, please. Maribel stiffened. No, really, I don't need. But he was already sliding it onto her tray. You do, he said simply. She opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Pride had kept her alive this long, but it had also starved her, stranded her, and nearly broken her. She exhaled. Thank you. He nodded once, and that was the end of it. For the next hour, the hum of the engines filled the silence. Camilla shifted in her arms, her small whimpers fading into steady breathing. Maribel stared down at her daughter's flushed face, guilt gnawing at the edges of her exhaustion. She should have been home, not here, not chasing after something she didn't even have words for anymore. Home, the word still hurt. Home had been her brother Lucas's laughter, her mother's kitchen, a life that had cracked open and spilled after too many losses. The funeral waiting at the other end of this flight wasn't supposed to be for Lucas. It wasn't supposed to be at all. Seattle, the pilot announced overhead. Weather's clear. We'll be landing in 20 minutes. Maribel's breath trembled. Her grip on Camilla tightened as the plane began its slow descent. She didn't realize she was crying until a napkin appeared in front of her. The man was holding it out wordlessly. She took it, blinking back tears. I'm fine. I didn't say you weren't. Something in his calm unnerved her. He wasn't offering comfort exactly. He was giving her space to be seen, and that was far worse. She dabbed her eyes and tried to smile again, but the attempt fell flat. When they landed, the cabin lights flickered on. Passengers rustled with bags and coats, murmuring polite goodbyes. The man stood, reached up for his briefcase, and paused. His gaze lingered on the sleeping baby, then on Maribel's weary face. As he stepped into the aisle, he said only, "Take care." She nodded, thinking that was the end of it. But when she looked down at her tray table, a folded napkin sat there. Inside, tucked between its creases, was a crisp $50 bill. Her first instinct was panic. She glanced up the aisle, heart racing, but he was already gone. No, she whispered under her breath, half rising from her seat. Wait, sir. A flight attendant blocked the row, smiling mechanically. Please stay seated until we reach the gate. Maribel sank back down, clutching the napkin. She wanted to tear it up, to throw it away, to prove she wasn't the kind of woman who took pity from strangers. But when she looked at her daughter's flushed cheeks and dry lips, pride gave way to something stronger. Love. By the time she stepped off the plane, she'd already spent the bill in her head. Baby food, fever medicine, and a bus ticket to the cheapest motel she could find. Outside, the terminal lights burned too bright against the wet tarmac. She adjusted the baby carrier, shifting Camilla closer to her chest. The storm in her chest quieted a little. She thought of the man's face, the unreadable eyes, the steady calm, and wondered who he was. A name, she thought. She hadn't even asked for his name. But as she stood under the cold glare of the arrivals board, lost and alone again, a black SUV pulled to the curb. The passenger window rolled down. It was him. "Need a ride?" Nathan asked. Maribel froze. The words caught somewhere between relief and disbelief. How did you know?" He shrugged. "Lucky guess." She hesitated, every instinct screaming to refuse. But then Camilla stirred, coughing softly. The wind cut sharp against her neck. Maribel looked at him once more, really looked, and something in his eyes told her this wasn't about pity. It was something else. A debt, a purpose, a beginning neither of them understood yet. "Okay," she whispered. He leaned across the seat and unlocked the door. And just like that, the flight that began with her last coins became the one that would change both their lives forever. The city was gray when they drove out of the airport. Wet streets, blinking traffic lights, a steady drizzle falling like breath against the windshield. Nathan drove in silence, one hand steady on the wheel, the other occasionally tapping the steering column, as if syncing to a rhythm only he could hear. Maribel sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her daughter asleep against her chest beneath a thin blanket. She still wasn't sure why she'd said yes. Maybe because the night was cold, or because the stranger who'd given her water and money had looked too calm to be dangerous. Still, every few minutes she caught herself glancing at the door handle, ready to bolt if she needed to. "You don't have to look so worried," Nathan said finally, eyes still on the road. "I'm not going to kidnap you." She flushed, embarrassed. "I didn't say I was worried." "You didn't have to." They drove past blocks of old brick buildings and rain-slicked sidewalks. His car smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Expensive. Warm. Everything about him screamed comfort, and it made her more uneasy than if he'd been cold. "Where should I drop you?" he asked. "I'm not sure yet." He turned slightly. "No place to stay?" She looked out the window, voice quiet. "There's a motel I saw online. Something cheap. I can find it." He didn't argue, but he didn't nod either. "You're here for family." Maribel hesitated, then said, "For my brother's funeral." The words fell heavy, and she immediately wished she hadn't said them. Nathan's hand tightened briefly on the steering wheel. "I'm sorry." She nodded, eyes fixed on the blurred lights outside. "It was an accident. Construction site collapse. They said he didn't suffer." Her throat constricted as she spoke. She'd repeated that sentence to herself so many times it almost sounded rehearsed now, like a story she told to make the grief behave. "What was his name?" Nathan asked softly. "Lucas. Lucas Cruz." The name seemed to catch him off guard. He blinked once, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "Lucas Cruz?" "Yes." Silence, then quieter. "Was he working on the Bryant Tower project?" She turned to him, startled. "How did you know that?" He didn't answer immediately. The car slowed, turning down a quieter street lined with misted streetlights. Finally, he said, "Because I was there, the day it happened." Maribel stared at him, unsure if she'd heard right. "You were, what?" "I was touring the site for my company. There was an equipment malfunction. I was standing right under it when the scaffolding gave way." He stopped at a light, his reflection ghosted in the windshield. "Your brother pushed me out of the way." Her breath caught. "You're saying Lucas saved you?" Nathan's eyes met hers, steady and haunted. "He did. If he hadn't," he trailed off. "He didn't even think. He just moved." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The rain against the glass filled the silence between them, soft and rhythmic, like the echo of a heartbeat that no longer existed. Maribel pressed her hand to her mouth, her chest tightening. "He never said anything. He told me the job was dangerous sometimes, but—" "Of course he didn't," Nathan said quietly. "Men like him never do." The light turned green, but Nathan didn't drive for a moment. He looked at her, his expression unreadable. "He was a good man, Maribel." Better than most I've known. She turned away, staring at the rain-slick glass. He always helped people, even when he couldn't help himself. Nathan exhaled. I've thought about him every day since, about how to say thank you to a man who never gave me the chance. Her hands clenched in her lap. You just did. He shook his head. No, I owe him more than words. Something in his tone made her uneasy again. Not fear exactly, but the gravity of a promise being reborn. The rest of the drive was quiet. When they reached the motel, Nathan parked beneath the flickering sign and turned off the engine. This isn't exactly a safe area, he said. It's what I can afford. He looked at her a long moment. Money isn't the issue tonight. Maribel bristled. I don't need charity. He gave a faint smile. Good, because I don't offer charity. I offer respect. She stared at him, caught between anger and confusion. Why are you doing this? Because your brother gave me my life, Nathan said softly, and something tells me he'd want me to use it for something better than just existing. He stepped out, came around, and opened her door before she could argue. Rain dotted his hair, his coat collar turned up against the cold. At least let me walk you in. Maribel hesitated, then nodded, clutching Camilla close. Together they crossed the cracked pavement to the small front office, where the clerk slid her a key without meeting her eyes. Room 106, a single lamp, a leaking faucet, but to Maribel it might as well have been a palace. Nathan helped her set Camilla on the bed, careful not to wake the baby. When he straightened, she said quietly, Thank you for the ride, for everything. He nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we'll talk. She frowned. About what? About how to make sure Lucas's kindness doesn't end with me. And before she could answer, he was gone, leaving only the faint scent of rain and cedar behind. Maribel stood by the window long after his SUV disappeared into the fog. She pressed her palm against the cool glass and whispered, Lucas, what did you start? Outside, the rain fell harder, as if the sky itself remembered too. The night pressed down like a weight. Outside the motel, rain drummed against the roof in steady rhythm, pooling in the cracked pavement below. Inside, Maribel sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, rocking Camilla gently. The baby's forehead still felt warm, her breathing shallow but steady. The fever medicine she'd managed to buy at the corner pharmacy hadn't worked yet. She brushed damp hair from her daughter's temple and whispered, Just sleep, my love. Please. The room was small and musty, its single bulb flickering in protest every few minutes. The sound of a leaky faucet kept time with her heartbeat. She should have been resting too, but her mind refused to stop. Lucas, Nathan, the accident. It all replayed in fragments. The day Lucas died, the night she'd boarded that plane, and the stranger who somehow knew the shape of her loss. She didn't know what Nathan wanted or why he cared. People didn't just show up and help for no reason. Her eyes burned with exhaustion. She laid Camilla back in the crib, wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater and whispered, You'll be okay. We both will. A knock at the door made her flinch. She froze, heart racing. It was past midnight. No one should be there. She crept closer, her hand hovering over the lock. Maribel? The voice was low, familiar. She let out a shaky breath and opened the door. Nathan stood there, rain dripping from his coat, a paper bag clutched in one hand. His hair was damp, his eyes tired. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to scare you. What are you doing here? I couldn't sleep, he admitted. I kept thinking about your daughter. You said she had a fever. Her throat tightened. She's still warm, but I'll manage. I know you will, he said, but you don't have to alone. He held up the bag. Food, some baby supplies, a thermometer? She hesitated. Pride and gratitude warred inside her. Nathan, you don't have to. I know, he said gently, but I want to. He said it with such simple sincerity that the words lodged in her chest. Maribel stepped aside, letting him in. He set the bag on the small table, unpacking quietly. Soup, bottled water, fever patches, formula, and a soft pink blanket. She blinked back tears. You didn't have to do all this. Nathan smiled faintly. That's the thing about help. It's not about having to. He crouched beside the crib and checked Camilla's forehead with the back of his hand. She's burning up. I've been trying everything I can, Maribel whispered. Cool cloths, medicine. I don't know what else to do. Let's take turns, he said. You rest. I'll watch her for a while. She shook her head. You shouldn't, Maribel, he interrupted softly. You've been fighting alone for too long. Let someone share the weight. Something in his tone, steady, unshakable, broke through her resistance. Her shoulders sagged. Just for a bit, she murmured. He nodded, rolling up his sleeves. He dipped a cloth into cool water and gently pressed it against the baby's neck. His movements were practiced, careful. You've done this before, she said quietly. His hand paused for a moment. My son used to get fevers like this. Her breath caught. You have a son? Had, he said softly. Mason. He passed away when he was 3. The air between them stilled. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know. Nathan gave a small nod. You couldn't have. How did you? She started, then stopped herself. He looked up, meeting her eyes. It wasn't an accident, just life being cruel. There was no bitterness in his voice, only an ache that had settled deep. I stopped believing in fairness after that, he added, until your brother. Lucas? Nathan nodded. He reminded me that people could still be good. He saved me without hesitation. He didn't know me, didn't care who I was. He just acted. Maribel's throat tightened. That sounds like him. Nathan gave a faint smile. He told a joke right after. Something about me owing him a coffee. Then the scaffolding shifted again, and he was gone before I could answer. She covered her mouth, tears spilling freely now. Nathan sat back, the memory flickering behind his calm expression. I've spent years trying to figure out what to do with that, how to make it matter. And then I saw you on that flight. Me? You looked exactly like he did that day. Tired, scared, but still holding someone else's life in your arms. Maribel couldn't find her voice. She sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Nathan continued, his tone softer. I didn't follow you to repay a debt. I came because it felt like the first time in years something made sense. Camilla whimpered, drawing their attention. Nathan replaced the cloth, and after a few moments the baby's breathing steadied again. She's cooling down, he said quietly. Maribel nodded, wiping her tears. Thank you. You don't have to thank me. Yes, I do. Her voice shook. No one's done something like this since Lucas. He smiled faintly. Then maybe it's time someone did. The room fell quiet again. Maribel leaned back against the headboard, exhaustion finally catching up with her. You should rest, Nathan said. You'll stay? Until morning, he promised. Her eyes fluttered closed before she could answer. The last thing she saw was Nathan sitting beside the crib, his head bowed, one hand gently patting Camilla's back. When she woke hours later, dawn was breaking. The fever had broken too. Camilla slept peacefully. Nathan was still there, asleep in the chair by the window, the first light of day painting him in pale gold. For the first time in months, Maribel felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Safe. The morning light filtered weakly through the motel curtains, washing the room in a pale gray glow. The rain had stopped some time before dawn, leaving behind the scent of damp earth and a sky streaked with silver. Maribel woke slowly, disoriented at first until the rhythmic sound of soft breathing drew her eyes toward the window. Nathan sat slumped in the chair beside the crib, head tilted against the wall, his jacket draped over his knees. Camilla was asleep, tiny fingers curled around one of his. The sight made Maribel's throat tighten. The man who, only days ago, had been a stranger on a flight now sat watch over her child as though he'd always belonged in the small, fragile circle of their lives. She rose quietly, pulling on her sweater. The floor creaked beneath her bare feet, and Nathan stirred, opening his eyes. Good morning, he said, voice husky from sleep. She smiled faintly. You stayed. I said I would. Her eyes flicked toward the crib. She's cooler now. The fever's gone. He nodded. I noticed. She's strong, like her mother. Maribel laughed softly, shaking her head. Strong isn't the word. Stubborn, maybe. Those two usually go hand in hand. The air between them settled into a comfortable quiet. For the first time in months, Maribel didn't feel like she was balancing on the edge of something breaking. Nathan stood, stretching, then reached for his coat. "You should eat something." "I'll make do," she said. "Not good enough," he replied, taking out his phone. "There's a cafe around the corner. I'll bring something back." "You don't have to." He met her gaze, his tone gentle but firm. "I know, but I want to." There it was again, that simple insistence that disarmed her every time. When he left, the room felt too quiet. Maribel sat beside the crib, brushing a thumb across Camilla's cheek. "He's strange, huh?" she whispered. "Kind in ways I don't know how to trust yet." Camilla stirred but didn't wake. Maribel sighed. "Maybe Lucas sent him. Maybe this is his way of saying he's still looking out for us." She didn't know if she believed in signs anymore, but something about the thought made her chest ache with a bittersweet warmth. Nathan returned 20 minutes later with a paper bag and 2 cups of coffee. "Breakfast," he said, handing her a sandwich. Maribel took it reluctantly. "You keep feeding me. I'll start owing you." He smirked. "You already do." She froze, uncertain if he was serious, but then he added, "You owe me 1 cup of decent coffee. The plain coffee doesn't count." Relief softened her face and she smiled. "Deal." They ate quietly at the small table, the smell of coffee filling the room. For a while, neither spoke. Then Nathan leaned back in his chair and said, "I've been thinking about Lucas." Maribel set her cup down. "You didn't have to come to the funeral," she said quietly, "but thank you for being there." "I needed to," Nathan said. "I owed him that much." "You didn't owe him anything," she said almost defensively. "He wouldn't have wanted you to feel that way." He met her gaze steadily. "He saved my life. That's a debt you can't balance. You're alive. That's payment enough." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I've never believed survival should be where the story ends." Maribel studied him, curiosity mixing with caution. "So what are you trying to do, Nathan? Fix things? Make up for what happened?" "Maybe I'm trying to understand why he did it," he admitted. "Why someone would risk everything for a stranger." "That's who he was," she said softly. "He didn't think about what he'd lose, only what someone else might." He nodded, looking down at his hands. "He told a joke before it happened, you know? Right before he pushed me out of the way." Her eyes widened. "He did?" He said, "You'd better buy me a beer after this, boss." Then he laughed. And the next second, Nathan's voice trailed off. Maribel felt tears sting her eyes. She turned away. "That sounds like him, always finding a way to laugh at the wrong time." Nathan leaned forward. "He told me something else once, a few weeks before the accident. I never really understood it until now." "What was it?" He said, "If something ever happens to me, don't let her try to survive it alone." Maribel froze. "He said that?" "Yes." Nathan's voice softened. "He talked about you all the time, you know. Said you were the one who carried the whole world on your back." Her breath caught. "He always worried too much." "Maybe," Nathan said, "but he wasn't wrong." The silence that followed was heavy with things neither knew how to name. Finally, Maribel spoke. "He wanted me to live, but some days surviving doesn't feel like living." "I know that feeling," Nathan murmured. She looked at him. "You said your son's name was Mason." He nodded. "How did you keep going after?" He exhaled slowly, the memory shadowing his face. "I didn't. Not really. I worked. I built things. I pretended it mattered. But grief finds cracks. It seeps in. Some days I'd think I was fine. Other days I'd find one of his old drawings and forget how to breathe." Maribel's eyes glistened. "That's how it is with Lucas, too. Some days I wake up and almost call him. Then I remember." Nathan reached across the table, not to touch her hand, but to steady his own. "Maybe that's why we found each other, Maribel. Two people who keep trying to rebuild what life keeps breaking." She studied him for a long moment. "You talk like this was meant to happen." He smiled faintly. "Maybe it was. Maybe this is how Lucas keeps saving people." Outside, sunlight finally broke through the clouds, spilling across the table and warming their faces. For the first time since her brother's death, Maribel didn't feel swallowed by the grief. Instead, she felt something lighter take its place, a fragile, cautious hope. Nathan stood and gathered the empty cups. Get some rest. I'll stop by later. She nodded, watching him leave, his words lingering like the fading scent of rain. When the door closed, Maribel looked down at Camilla, who had begun to stir. Your uncle was right, she whispered, smiling through tears. We're not alone anymore. The rain had faded by afternoon, leaving the city slick with reflection. Maribel stood by the motel window, watching people hurry along the sidewalks, umbrellas blooming like small bursts of color under the gray sky. Camilla slept peacefully in the crib, her fever fully broken now. Every few minutes, Maribel looked over just to make sure her daughter was breathing evenly, the instinct of a mother who'd spent too many nights waiting for bad news. The quiet felt strange. She wasn't used to peace. When a soft knock sounded at the door, her body tensed automatically. But then a familiar voice said, "It's me." She opened the door to find Nathan standing there, his coat unbuttoned, a warm breeze of coffee and rain following him inside. He was holding something in his hand, a small envelope and a key. Maribel frowned. You found me a bill already? He chuckled. Not exactly. She stepped aside so he could enter. You didn't have to come back. I said we'd talk, he reminded her, setting the envelope on the table. I keep my word. He sat, glancing around the small room, the peeling wallpaper, the tiny kitchenette, the crib tucked against the wall. You've done what you can here, he said, but it's no place for a baby. Maribel crossed her arms. It's what I can afford. I know, Nathan said gently. That's why I'm offering something different. He slid the envelope across the table toward her. Open it. Inside was a rental agreement, her name printed neatly at the top, an address near Green Lake. Rent paid in advance for 6 months. Maribel's heart lurched. What is this? It's an apartment, Nathan said simply. Small but safe, clean, close to a park. I made sure the building accepts families. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Nathan, no, I can't take this. It's already done. That's not the point, she said, her voice rising. I don't want to be someone's obligation. He looked up at her, calm but firm. You're not an obligation. You're doing this out of guilt, because of Lucas, because you think you owe him. I'm doing this because your brother saved my life, Nathan said quietly, and I've spent every day since trying to figure out what that means. Maybe this, helping you, maybe it's part of that answer. Maribel shook her head, her chest tight. You don't even know me. I know enough, he said. I know you'd rather sleep on the floor than take charity. I know you haven't had a single day to rest since you buried your brother. And I know that somewhere inside all that pride is someone who still believes in hope, even when life keeps taking it away. His words hit harder than she expected. Her throat burned, but she refused to cry. You can't fix me with money. I'm not trying to fix you, Nathan said. I'm trying to give you room to stand again. The silence that followed stretched between them, heavy and uncertain. Maribel sank onto the edge of the bed, staring down at the contract. What happens when the 6 months are over? Then you'll be strong enough to decide what comes next, he said. And when that happens, I'll be proud to say I had nothing left to give you, because you won't need it. His tone wasn't condescending. It was quiet, certain, and somehow it made her want to believe him. I can't promise I'll stay, she murmured. I'm not asking you to. She looked up, meeting his gaze. Why are you like this, Nathan? He smiled faintly. Because someone once pulled me out from under a broken world. I'm just trying to return the favor. She exhaled shakily. You're impossible. I've heard worse. Later that day, they drove to the apartment. The rain had stopped, and a soft golden light spilled through the clouds as they turned down a quiet street lined with old maples. The building itself was modest but well kept. Brick facade, white-trimmed windows, flower boxes on the balconies. Nathan handed her the key. Welcome home. Maribel hesitated at the door, her heart caught between gratitude and fear. You really don't have to. I do, he said, because I can, and because he would have wanted me to. She took the key. The lock turned smoothly, the door opening into a small living room filled with warm light. There was a couch, a table, even a crib already assembled against one wall. She froze. How did you? I called a friend, Nathan said with a shrug. Thought you'd need a head start. Maribel pressed a hand to her mouth. The room blurred. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, he replied. Just start over. She turned toward him, eyes shimmering. This isn't charity. No, Nathan said softly. It's a second chance. That night after he left, Maribel wandered through the apartment in silence. The space felt too big, too quiet. She touched the walls, the table, the crib. Every surface, tangible proof that kindness didn't have to come with strings. Sitting at the kitchen counter, she unfolded a piece of paper and began to write. Dear Lucas, I don't know if you call this fate or just luck, but I think you're still looking out for me. I met the man you saved. He's strange, kind in a way that scares me. He built me a place to start again. I don't know if I deserve it, but I'll try to make something good out of it. If love can echo, maybe this is yours coming back to me. She folded the letter and tucked it into her purse, beside a worn photo of her brother. Then she went to check on Camilla, who was sleeping peacefully in her new crib. Outside, the rain began again, soft, cleansing, endless. Maribel lay down beside her daughter and closed her eyes, for once unafraid of tomorrow. The apartment smelled faintly of fresh paint and rain. Maribel stood by the window, watching the city blink awake in shades of gray and gold. The soft hum of morning traffic drifted through the glass, mixing with the quiet rhythm of Camilla's breathing from the crib. It had been 2 weeks since Nathan handed her the key, and every day still felt unreal. The apartment wasn't large, just one bedroom, a small kitchen, and a living room that caught the morning sun. But to her, it was everything. It was stability. It was peace, and it terrified her. She'd built her life around expecting disappointment. Safety, when it came, always had a catch. Nathan hadn't visited in a few days, though he sent the occasional text. How's Camilla doing? Or, did you get a chance to rest? The messages were simple, but the consistency of them startled her. People didn't stay. They helped, then vanished. So why hadn't he? She was still asking herself that when her phone buzzed again. Nathan, can you meet me this afternoon? There's something I want to show you. Her stomach nodded. What now? Still, she typed back. Okay. Where? Nathan, I'll pick you up at 2. Dress warm. The sky was overcast by the time his car pulled up in front of the building. Nathan stepped out, wearing a dark coat and that same calm expression that never seemed to crack. You didn't tell me where we're going, she said, slipping into the passenger seat. I figured you'd come anyway. She smirked. That confident? Just hopeful, he said. They drove north, the city slowly giving way to quieter streets. Maribel recognized nothing. The route twisted through unfamiliar neighborhoods, past rows of warehouses and half-renovated storefronts. When Nathan finally parked, she frowned. This looks abandoned. Not for long, he said, stepping out. The building was old brick, 2 stories tall, its faded sign barely legible, but the windows had been cleaned, the door replaced, and a faint smell of paint lingered in the air. Maribel followed him inside. The first thing she noticed was the space, wide and open, sunlight spilling through high windows onto newly polished floors. Shelves stood along the walls stacked with boxes of formula, diapers, and canned food. A few volunteers painted the far side of the room, laughter echoing softly through the emptiness. What is this? She whispered. Nathan turned to her, eyes bright with quiet pride. It's called the Camilla Project. She blinked, certain she'd misheard. Camilla, as in my Camilla? He nodded. Yes, her breath caught. Nathan, he smiled faintly. It's a community center, for single parents mostly, a place where they can find food, support, maybe a job lead or just someone to talk to. I started the foundation years ago, but it never felt complete until now. Why me? She asked. Because you know what this feels like, he said, because you've lived it. Maribel turned in a slow circle, trying to absorb what she was seeing. You built all this? With help, he admitted. Donations, volunteers. But it's yours to run, if you'll take it. Her heart stumbled. Mine? I can fund it, organize the logistics. But it needs a voice that understands the people it serves. Lucas would have done it if he could. At her brother's name, she froze. You're doing this for him. I'm doing this for both of you, he said softly, for every person who thinks their story ends when life falls apart. Tears blurred her vision. She shook her head. Nathan, I can't. I don't know how to run anything. I've spent the last year just trying to survive. He stepped closer, voice calm but certain. You've already done more than most people do in a lifetime. You survived, yes, but you did it with grace. You know what it's like to lose everything and keep fighting. That's what this place needs. She stared at him, her chest tightening with something she couldn't name. You really think I can do this? I don't think, he said. I know. That afternoon, they walked through the rest of the building together. Nathan showed her the storage rooms, the tiny office, the half-finished kitchen that volunteers planned to turn into a food station. He spoke about community partners, funding plans, and long-term sustainability. But what struck her most wasn't the scale of his vision. It was the quiet way he believed in it. When they reached the back door, he stopped beside a wall where someone had hung a framed photograph. Maribel stepped closer. It was a picture of Lucas, smiling, dirt on his face, one arm slung around a younger Nathan in a hard hat. Her hand trembled. Where did you get this? I kept it, Nathan said. From the site. I didn't know what to do with it for years. I guess I do now. She touched the glass, tracing her brother's grin. He'd laugh if he saw this. Then let him, Nathan said quietly. He's the reason any of this exists. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but she didn't bother to wipe them away. You're turning his sacrifice into something good, she whispered. Something that lasts. He looked at her, eyes soft. So are you. As evening fell, they stood outside under the awning, the first drops of rain beginning to fall again. Maribel hugged her arms around herself. I don't even know what to say. Say yes, he said gently. To what? To starting over, to building something that matters. She met his gaze, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel small or lost. She felt seen. She nodded slowly. Yes, Nathan smiled. Then let's begin. The rain came harder now, but neither of them moved. It fell against the roof like a promise. Steady, cleansing, unstoppable. And for the first time since her brother's death, Maribel felt the world shift beneath her feet. Not breaking this time, but rebuilding. The next few weeks unfolded like the first breath after a storm, uneven, cautious, but full of light. The Camilla Project opened its doors quietly, with no ribbon cutting or press, just a handwritten sign taped to the glass that read, Open, come in if you need something. That had been Maribel's idea. She didn't want it to feel like a charity. She wanted it to feel like home. And slowly it became one. Families came in waves, single parents, grandparents raising grandchildren, young mothers with babies wrapped in blankets that weren't warm enough. They arrived hesitant, ashamed, unsure if they belonged, but by the time they left, they were smiling, their arms full of groceries or diapers or donated coats. Every time she handed someone a meal, every time a child laughed in the small play corner, something inside Maribel healed. It wasn't perfect. The shelves emptied faster than they could restock, and some nights she worked until midnight sorting donations, her hands raw from cardboard and detergent. But exhaustion no longer scared her. It meant she was building something. Nathan came often in the beginning, usually late after the volunteers had gone. He'd bring coffee, roll up his sleeves, and restock shelves beside her. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them had changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was companionable. Safe. One evening, as they sorted through boxes of donated clothes, Nathan broke the quiet. Do you ever stop? Maribel looked up from the pile she was folding. What do you mean? You're here before everyone and leave after they do, he said, shaking his head. You don't have to carry all of it yourself. She smiled faintly. I've been carrying my own life for years. This feels lighter. He watched her for a moment, then said, You're good at this. She laughed softly. I'm just learning as I go. That's what makes you good at it. You don't lead with pride. You lead with empathy. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. You sound like someone who's done this before? He smiled wryly. I've tried, But I was always better at building things with walls than with people. Maribel set down a folded jacket. You built this too? No, Nathan said. You gave it a heart. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other, the air thick with words neither of them could yet speak. Then mercifully, Camilla's small giggle from the corner broke the tension. Guess she's the real boss around here, Nathan said. Maribel smiled. Always has been. As winter deepened, the work grew busier. Donations poured in, volunteers multiplied, and the Camilla project became something of a local miracle. A journalist even stopped by one morning to write a small piece about a mother and a businessman turning loss into hope. Maribel hated the attention. Nathan handled most of it, his calm professionalism shielding her from the noise. But behind closed doors, the pace was wearing him down. She noticed the shadows under his eyes, the way his smile faltered when he thought no one was watching. One night after everyone left, she found him sitting alone at one of the tables, staring at the photograph of Lucas they'd hung by the entrance. You've been quiet lately, she said softly, setting a cup of tea in front of him. He looked up, startled, then smiled faintly. You caught me. You're working too much. He huffed a laugh. Says the woman who hasn't gone home before 9 all month. She sat across from him. Touché. But you look tired. More than usual. Nathan took a slow sip of tea before answering. I had a meeting with my company's board this morning. They want me to come back full time. Her chest tightened. You're leaving. I didn't say that, he said, but maybe it's time I step away. Let you run things here. You can't mean that, she said quickly. This place, none of it exists without you. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's the point. It's not supposed to exist because of me. It's supposed to live on without me. Maribel stared at him, her throat thickening. Why do you always talk like you're trying to disappear? Because I've already done my part, he said softly. Lucas saved my life once. You saved it again, in a different way. Maybe that's all I was meant to do. Help pass it forward. She shook her head, tears prickling her eyes. Don't talk like that. You're not a debt to repay, Nathan. You're... She stopped, unable to finish the thought. He looked at her then, truly looked, his expression open and vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. Maribel, if I go, it won't be because I don't care. It'll be because I do. Her hands clenched. You think leaving helps anyone? I think it helps you, he said gently. You don't need me to stand beside you forever. You already know how to walk on your own. Maribel laughed bitterly. That's not the point. Then what is? He asked quietly. She met his gaze, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. That you made me believe again, and I don't want to lose that. The silence that followed was soft and fragile, like glass balanced between them. Nathan reached across the table, hesitating before his fingers brushed hers. You won't lose it, he said. You'll just carry it forward. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that she wasn't ready for another goodbye. But the words wouldn't come. Outside, snow began to fall, the first flakes of winter drifting past the window like whispers. Nathan stood, slipping on his coat. We'll talk soon. When? He hesitated at the door. Soon, he said again, but this time his voice cracked. When the door closed behind him, Maribel sat alone, staring at the steam rising from his untouched cup of tea. Camilla stirred in the playpen, and Maribel went to her, lifting her gently. She held her daughter close and whispered, You don't lose people like him, baby. They just change the shape of how they stay. Outside, the snow thickened, erasing footprints from the steps, but not from her heart. The first snow of January turned the city to glass and quiet. From her office window, Maribel watched the flakes fall past the sign that read, The Camilla Project. Hope begins here. The lights inside glowed warm against the gray sky, and laughter echoed faintly from the playroom, where volunteers were wrapping toys for the children's winter drive. It should have felt like triumph. The shelves were full, the donation drive steady, the community thriving, but Maribel's chest felt hollow. Every day since that night, since Nathan had walked out with snow in his hair and goodbye in his voice, the ache had settled deeper. He hadn't come back. He hadn't called. He hadn't written. She told herself he was busy, that maybe he'd chosen to return to his company, that this, their creation, had freed him from the ghosts of the past. But every time she caught sight of the photograph of Lucas on the wall, Nathan's words replayed, "You don't need me to stand beside you forever." Maybe he was right. Maybe she didn't. But that didn't mean she didn't want him to. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. One of the volunteers, a young father named Dennis, stood in the doorway, hat in hand. "Maribel, the last family just left. You should head home too. It's getting bad out there." She smiled faintly. "Thanks, Dennis. I'll close up." When he was gone, she turned off the overhead lights, leaving only the small lamp on her desk glowing. The center looked different in the dimness, more fragile, more intimate. She walked through the main room, touching the back of a chair here, a toy there, the way one touches something they built with their own hands. Her fingers brushed the framed photo of Lucas and Nathan near the front entrance. "You'd tell me not to wait for anyone," she murmured. "You'd tell me to keep moving forward." Camilla stirred softly in the stroller beside her, half asleep. Maribel smiled down at her. "You're the brave one, you know that?" The baby made a small cooing noise, and Maribel laughed quietly. "Yeah, I guess we both are." She reached for her coat, but froze when she heard it. A knock at the door. 3 slow raps. Familiar. Careful. Her heart stopped. For a second, she thought she'd imagined it. Then it came again. She turned, pulse racing, and there he was, standing on the other side of the glass, snow melting in his hair, exhaustion carved into his face. Nathan. Maribel didn't move at first. The sight of him was too sharp, too unexpected, like a memory that had stepped out of her mind and into the cold. He raised a hand, uncertain. She exhaled shakily and went to unlock the door. The winter air swept in as he stepped inside, his breath fogging. "Hey! Hey!" she repeated, half laughing, half angry. "That's what you start with after vanishing for, 2 months?" "I deserve that," he said quietly. "Probably more." She crossed her arms, trying to mask the way her voice shook. "You could have called, or written, or anything." "I know." He took a step closer, then stopped. "I didn't because I wasn't ready. I thought leaving was what you needed." "What I needed?" she echoed, incredulous. "You think you get to decide that for me?" "I thought I was doing the right thing," he said, his tone soft, raw. "The board offered me a deal, new contracts, new responsibilities. I told myself it was a chance to honor Lucas. But it didn't feel like honor. It felt like running again." Her anger wavered. "So why are you here now?" "Because I finally realized something." She waited, heart pounding. He met her eyes. "It wasn't Lucas I needed to thank. It was you." Maribel blinked, her throat tightening. "Nathan, you took what he gave me, a second chance, and made it mean something real," he said. "You turned it into life, into love, into this." He gestured around them, the center glowing softly in the dark. "And I left because I didn't think I deserved to be part of it." Her voice was barely a whisper. "And now?" He took another step forward. "Now I know that you're the only thing that's ever felt like home." The words landed like a weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Her hands trembled as she looked at him, at the sincerity in his tired face, at the man who'd walked into her chaos and quietly rebuilt her world. "You could have said that months ago," she whispered. "I was a coward," he said simply, "but I'm here now, if you'll let me be." For a long moment, all she could hear was the ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum of the heater. Then slowly she nodded. "You don't get to leave again." "I won't," he said. "Promise me." "I promise." The air between them softened. He reached out carefully as if afraid she might disappear, and when she didn't pull away, he took her hand. His fingers were cold, hers trembling, but the touch felt like the missing piece of a puzzle finally snapping into place. Behind them, Camilla let out a small cry, breaking the silence. Maribel laughed through tears, turning toward her daughter. Nathan smiled. "She's bigger." "She's louder too," Maribel said, lifting the baby into her arms. Camilla blinked sleepily at him, then reached for his face, tiny fingers curling against his cheek. Nathan's voice wavered. "She remembers me." Of course she does, Maribel said softly. She remembers kindness. He looked at her then, his eyes glistening. And you? Maribel met his gaze. I remember hope. Outside, snow fell heavier, blanketing the street in white. Inside, under the golden light of the small lamp, 3 lives stood together for the first time without fear of breaking apart. Maribel turned back to the photograph of Lucas by the door. We're okay, she whispered, and somewhere, it felt like the world answered her, quiet, certain, and full of peace. The snow had melted by the end of February, leaving behind streets slick with puddles and a world that seemed to shimmer with renewal. Inside the Camilla project, the sound of chatter and laughter filled every corner. Children running through the hall, volunteers sorting donations, the smell of coffee and warmth lingering in the air. Maribel moved through it all like a quiet current, greeting everyone by name, her once cautious steps now certain. The center had become something bigger than either of them had imagined, bigger than pain, or loss, or fear. Nathan stood by the window, watching her. He'd returned not as a benefactor, but as her partner, someone who built beside her instead of leading. The lines around his eyes had softened. The restless energy that used to hum beneath his calm exterior had quieted. When she caught him staring, she smirked. You're supposed to be labeling boxes, not brooding by the window. He grinned. I'm just making sure everything's running smoothly. You mean watching other people do all the work? He lifted his hands in mock surrender. Guilty. Maribel shook her head, laughing as she adjusted a stack of folded blankets. You've changed, Nathan. I had a good teacher, he said, his tone light but sincere. Her smile faltered, not from discomfort, but from the weight of what that meant. You think we're really doing it? He looked around at the full room, the mothers smiling over cups of tea, the sound of a lullaby humming softly from the playroom. I think we already did. That evening, after the last volunteer had gone, they stayed behind to clean. The quiet felt sacred, peaceful and heavy with memory. Nathan wiped down tables while Maribel locked up the supply closet. I can't believe it's been a year, she said. He glanced at her. Since that flight, she corrected softly. Since everything changed. Nathan set down the cloth and leaned against the table. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't sat beside you that day? She smiled faintly. Sometimes, but then I remind myself fate has better timing than I do. He chuckled. That's one way to look at it. Maribel's gaze lingered on the framed photo near the entrance. Lucas smiling, a little smudge of dirt on his cheek, a beam of sunlight caught in his hair. He'd be proud of this, you know. Proud of you. Nathan's voice lowered. He's the reason I could face life again, but you're the reason I learned to live it. The words sank into her like warmth spreading through cold hands. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked toward him, her steps slow but certain. I used to think surviving meant just getting through the day, she said quietly. But now, I think it means having something to lose again, and being brave enough to hold on anyway. Nathan's gaze softened. You've always been brave, Maribel. You just needed someone to remind you. She smiled gently. You talk like you're still making up for something. He sighed. Maybe I always will be. Maribel shook her head. You don't owe Lucas anything anymore. You honored him the moment you stopped running. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the ticking clock on the wall and the soft hum of the heater. Then Nathan said, You're right, I don't owe him anymore, but I do owe you. She frowned. For what? For letting me in, he said simply. For giving me a second chance to build something that matters. She stepped closer, close enough to see the faint scar along his jaw she hadn't noticed before, close enough to see the tenderness in his eyes. Then we're even, she whispered. Later that night, they walked out together, locking the glass doors behind them. The streets glistened under the dim glow of streetlights, puddles reflecting fragments of stars. Maribel carried Camilla, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder, her soft breath steady and sure. Nathan held the umbrella, angling it so the light drizzle brushed only against him. You're going to catch cold, she said. He smiled. You forget, I live in Seattle. Rain's a constant. She chuckled. You still could have shared the umbrella. He tilted it slightly toward her. Better? Much. They walked in silence for a while. the sound of their footsteps mingling with the patter of rain. "Nathan," she said after a moment, "why did you name it the Camilla Project?" He looked thoughtful. "Because she's what started it. You fought so hard for her. Every choice you made was about giving her a better life. It felt right." Maribel smiled down at her daughter. "She won't remember any of this." "Maybe not," he said, "but she'll grow up surrounded by it. And one day when she asks, you'll tell her that hope isn't something people give you. It's something you pass on." Her eyes glistened. "You always know what to say." "I've had practice," he said lightly. But the truth in his words lingered. They stopped at the corner where their paths usually split. His car parked a block away, her apartment in sight down the street. The rain slowed to a mist. "Will you come by tomorrow?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "Try and stop me." She hesitated, then reached out, touching his arm. "Nathan." He turned toward her, eyes questioning. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not for the center, for not giving up, on me." He looked at her for a long moment before replying. "You gave me the reason not to." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then he leaned forward, pressing a light kiss to her forehead, gentle, grounding, filled with unspoken promise. Maribel closed her eyes. It wasn't romance. It wasn't rescue. It was peace. When she opened them again, Nathan was smiling. "Get her home safe." She nodded. "Good night, Nathan." As she walked away, the world felt lighter somehow. The rain stopped, and in its place came silence, the kind that wasn't empty, but full. Maribel looked back once before turning the corner. Nathan was still there under the streetlight, watching her with the quiet certainty of someone who'd finally found where he belonged. And for the first time, she believed they both had. Spring came softly that year, slow and kind, as if the world itself knew they needed time to breathe again. The cherry trees along Green Lake were just starting to bloom, their petals scattering over the water like pieces of memory. From the front window of the Camilla Project, Maribel could see families strolling past, hands intertwined, laughter carried on the breeze. Inside, the center was alive with its own rhythm. Children chasing each other through the playroom, volunteers chatting in the kitchen, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. It had been almost a year since the day she'd stepped off that plane, with $11 in her pocket and a feverish baby in her arms. Everything she'd lost back then, hope, faith, belonging, had somehow found its way back to her, one act of kindness at a time. Nathan walked in, brushing a few stray petals from his shoulders. "You know," he said, smiling, "I still can't get over how busy this place gets." Maribel looked up from the donation ledger. "You sound surprised every time." "I'm not surprised," he said, "just proud." She laughed softly. "You sound like Lucas when he used to fix the neighbors' bikes. He'd act all modest and then check every tire twice, just to make sure they'd roll perfectly." "Seems like it runs in the family," Nathan said, leaning against the desk. Maribel shook her head, smiling. "Lucas never stopped. I used to think he gave too much of himself away. Now I get it." He glanced around, the hum of conversation filling the silence between them. "You've turned this place into something beautiful, Maribel. You did that." She closed the ledger, her voice quiet. "We did that." Later that afternoon, they stood outside while volunteers loaded boxes of supplies into a van, bound for the new branch they'd opened 2 towns over, the second Camilla Project. Maribel still couldn't believe it sometimes, that what began as one small room had grown into something bigger, spreading hope the way Lucas once had, the way Nathan had taught her to. "You realize," Nathan said, watching her, "this is only the beginning." She smiled. "That's what scares me." He chuckled. "It should. If it didn't, it wouldn't be worth it." She turned toward him, her gaze warm. "You talk like you're staying." He raised a brow. "Was that in question?" "I wasn't sure," she said honestly. "You've always been someone who disappears when the job's done." Nathan's smile softened. "Maybe that used to be true, but this time, I want to see how the story ends." Maribel laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You say that like it's a book." "Maybe it is," he said. "And maybe this is the part where both characters realize they were never supposed to save each other. They were supposed to rebuild something together." She studied him, heart steady but full. Then maybe it's time we stop surviving and start living. Agreed, he said, his voice low. That evening, as the last rays of light stretched across the floor, they hosted their anniversary gathering. Dozens of families filled the space. People who'd once walked through their doors broken and now stood taller, laughter replacing silence. Maribel spoke first, standing beneath the simple wooden sign that still bore her daughter's name. When this started, she said, her voice trembling slightly, I thought I was just trying to repay a debt, to honor my brother. But what I learned is that kindness doesn't keep score. It doesn't demand balance. It just grows. She paused, glancing at Nathan. This place isn't about me or even about Lucas. It's about all of us. Everyone who believes that life can start again, even when it seems like it's over. The crowd applauded, but her gaze stayed on Nathan. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The pride in his eyes said enough. Afterward, when the families left and the building quieted, Maribel sat with Camilla on her lap in the front office, rocking gently while the little girl slept. Nathan stood at the doorway, hands in his pockets, watching them. She's growing fast, he said softly. Maribel smiled. Too fast. Some days I wake up and wonder if she remembers the beginning, how hard it was, how scared I was. She doesn't need to, he said. She'll grow up surrounded by love. That's all she'll remember. Maribel looked up at him, eyes glistening. You really believe that? He nodded. I do. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that felt complete. Outside, the wind carried the soft rustle of cherry blossoms, the faint hum of the city beyond. Lucas would have loved this, she said finally. He does, Nathan replied. She turned toward him. You think he's watching? Nathan smiled faintly. I think people like him don't ever leave. They just change how they stay. Maribel let out a slow breath, the weight in her chest easing. You always know what to say. Not always, he admitted, just when it matters. Later, after Nathan had locked up and the city lights shimmered over the lake, they walked home together. The night air was cool, the sky clear enough to see the faint trace of stars. Camilla slept in her stroller, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. Maribel tucked a blanket around her and glanced up at the sky. You know, she said softly, there was a time when I thought life was just about surviving one more day. Now it feels like there's more. There is, Nathan said, because you made it so. She smiled. No, we did. He looked at her for a long moment before reaching out and taking her hand. She didn't pull away. They walked in silence, their steps slow, steady, perfectly in rhythm. When they reached the corner where their paths usually split, Maribel stopped. Stay for dinner, she said. Nathan smiled, eyes bright with quiet joy. I thought you'd never ask. As they walked the last block toward her apartment, the world felt lighter than it ever had before. The ache of grief had softened into gratitude, the sharp edges of loss worn down by time and compassion. And when Maribel looked over at him, the man her brother had once saved, she realized something simple and true. Nathan hadn't changed her life by rescuing her. He'd changed it by reminding her she was never beyond saving herself. Later, when Camilla stirred in her crib and the night settled over the quiet apartment, Maribel stood by the window, the reflection of the glowing sign across the street faint in the glass. The Camilla Project. Hope begins here. She smiled, whispering into the stillness. You were right, Lucas. We made it. Behind her, Nathan's voice came soft, steady. And this time, we're just getting started.